There is no surprise that in the year of 2025, and many nations today are facing what we call the depopulation. One of the major concerns is about the population decrease across the world. Of course, this is very concerning, especially from this economic standpoint. Now, when we look at regarding the issue of depopulation, and one thing we have to understand, what is happening to the younger generations today? Because when we talk about family value, compared with the traditional understanding, everything has changed dramatically. But meanwhile, as parents, we're continuing struggling with parenting guidance and also finding the tangible and most effective ways to teaching the younger kids, and especially from this economic and social and political standpoint. One of the experts mentioned recently regarding the word relationship. It's rather more meaningful that we pay attention to the relationship between the parents and children rather just focusing on the outcome or the productivity of the relationship. It is complicated, and that's right. So that's why in this episode, we are going to talk about why relationships are so critical, especially for parents and children, and how do we understand the standard of being what we call good parents. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker, who is Isabelle Hau. Isabelle Hau is the executive director of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, a Stanford-wide initiative to connect researchers across discipline and bridge research, practice, and policy to bring quality, scalable, and equitable learning experiences for all learners and throughout the lifespan. She's the author of this amazing book called Love to Learn, The Transformative Power of Care and Connection in Early Education. Well, Isabelle, and welcome to The Missing Piece.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Well, again, the pleasure is all mine. Now, Isabelle, I want to get started with your book. I mean, your book really comes in a timely manner, especially when we talk about more and more younger parents today are struggling with dealing the relationship with the kids. I mean, we understand kids go through different phases. It's one thing to understand it, but it's something else to put into practice. Let's go to your book right away. At the beginning of the book, that you wrote this regarding what we called the role of teachers. And this is what you wrote, and I quote, "Next to immediate family, teachers have the most influence on people's lives as they grow up. In fact, a majority of Americans report that a teacher had a significant positive impact on their life." Isabelle, from your perspective, before we talk about parents or parental guidance, what is the role of teacher today? Or what are the roles of teachers today? And why are they significant when we look at human relationships? Your thoughts?
Yeah, so all of us humans have really social brains, and our social brains are fueled with human relationships. And those human relationships can be, of course, a parent, especially in the early years of life, and we can come back to that in a moment. But teachers play also a huge role. And when you ask people, they very often refer to one specific teacher that really changed the trajectory of their lives. And it was a case for me, but it's a case for so many of us, that this particular adult who played the role of a teacher really played such a meaningful transformational role. On your question, Will, about what are the roles of teachers, roles of teachers today actually are evolving quite dramatically. This is a very important point also in our education environments. But generally, there are two or three things that teachers are in charge of. One is the transfer of knowledge, which has been one of the very traditional pieces of teacher's role. And that piece actually is transforming quite dramatically with all these new technologies that are emerging, including artificial intelligence, of course, and other technologies. But there is another major piece of the role of a teacher, which is this relational piece, which gets a lot more to the other side, but maybe cognitive, but also social, emotional development of a child, or for the matter, any human being. And that piece, that relational piece, is based on science, one of the most critical elements of someone to learn and thrive.
Isabelle, let's go to the next topic. I mean, again, before we talk about the parents, but one thing that, or should we say, a major part of your book focused on the word love. And then you mentioned and you wrote that a future where learning it's relational and love it's a literacy. As a parent of two kids myself, and again, we're all familiar with the word love. It's not just about offering materials and buying things for kids. It's really about the word companionship and be present, available. But coming from your perspective, especially you're the expert, what does that mean that we say love it's a literacy? And how do we understand the concept? And again, I believe, as we mentioned in the intro, more and more parents today across the board are getting much younger. I mean, despite the depopulation is still taking place. But when it comes to understanding the word love, when it comes to understanding the offering love or just, showing or demonstrating love can be rather ambiguous or can be even rather perplexing. So from your perspective, how do we understand the core concept of love when we talk about building the relationship or sustaining the relationship between children and parents? Your thoughts?
So love is one of those taboo words in education context. In education context, we very rarely speak about love. We speak about achievement. We speak about rigor. We speak about quality. We speak about effectiveness. We have a lot of other words that we use in education. It's very rare that we use the word love. It's almost as if it were taboo. However, in my mind, and based on all the science of relationships, which is a huge body of science, love actually may be one of those silver bullets in education, because our brains as humans are so social. The brain develops and is fueled by human relationships. So at home, it's far less taboo. The concept of love, of course, most parents give tremendous amount of love to their child and want to be the best parents they can. However, our societies are such that, parents are busy, they work, they have a lot of other responsibilities. They are also often, distracted by technology tools. At this point in the US, any adult checks their phone 204 times a day. So clearly there is a lot of opportunity for disruption of those loving moments between a child and a parent just based on checking our devices on a very regular basis because of a work notification or a friend or a family member or over messages that we get all the time. I think that parents and educators want to be relational. They want to provide love. This is why most teachers go into this profession, and this is why what most parents want to be. However, our modern societies are complicated because of the amount of work expectations and those technology tools that get in the way.
Isabelle, there's no denying, and of course, that we have seen numbers and statistics came out one after another post the pandemic. We know that during the pandemic age, that the whole world was isolated from one another. But post the pandemic, here's something that I still don't understand. And also, I think I believe that you wrote in the book as well, that more and more teenagers today are still feeling or getting the sense of loneliness. I mean, we're no longer isolated in house or isolated in buildings. We have plenty of opportunities to socialize, to build relationships with one another in person or online. And given the fact that you mentioned that AI, it's thriving to the next stage in 2025. But meanwhile, why do you think that teenagers today, especially we've seen this in school, kids are less sociable and children in school are less engaged? And also, we're looking at the relationship between the parents and children, the children with the teachers. Everyone is struggling, but we still don't understand it. So you are one expert and you are an educator. How do we understand this post-pandemic loneliness, and why is it still happening to our kids today who are becoming less sociable, struggling with building relationships, or even have a decent conversation with one another without getting into trouble or conflict? Your thoughts, Isabelle?
Yeah, social connections are a little bit like physical fitness, where if we haven't been going to the gym for a little while, it's harder to go back. Same with social connections. If we have had a prolonged period of interruptions of those connections, it's harder to be back and be very social. There's this really interesting research that was done outside of the pandemic, is well before the pandemic, that was done for children who had experienced cancer. And, they had been hospitalized and away from their friends. And then out of remission after the disease had been fought against, they were back in a normal context. And the research showed that those kids were really struggling with making friends again. And I think it's the same thing here that's happening, is the social fitness is low right now. So we really need to work on it a little bit, like going back to the gym, if we haven't been to it for a little while, we need to work really actively on it, and teenagers need and families really need to make the space and foster those times and moments for connections, whether that connection is between an adult and a teen, or between teens themselves, or children for the matter themselves.
Isabelle, I want to move on to the next topic. And regarding, I know one of the chapters that you focus on regarding the outcome or the productivity of the relationship. Now, I have to be honest that I am one of the parents, again, probably out of many. As a father of two kids, I remember that I constantly used to drill my daughter with the habit of reading. I mean, I took time off, and also I tried to plan the time ahead of the business, and really want my daughter to sit down and have the reading with me. And that was way before she turned 3. But as soon as she turned 3 and getting close to 4, the whole rebellion started right away. There was no reading time and she was not interested. I know in your book, you talk about this. It's not just about learning. It's not just about reading. So Isabelle, on behalf of millions and millions of the parents, want to ask you, what did I do wrong? I mean, is it something that I miss during the early childhood education? Or am I too driven? Because a lot of my friends around me, they told me, say, the prime age of reading, or the prime age to cultivate the habit of reading, it's between 3 to 6. My daughter, she's 4 right now. So is there anything that I don't understand so that I'm still struggling with the habit of building this reading relationship with her? Or perhaps, how should we understand that? Are we focusing more on the process, on the relationship, or we should definitely look at the outcome or continue with the ambition? I know that's a lot of questions, but go ahead, Isabelle.
So, Will, based on what you're describing, to me, what you have done is so perfect. Building this habit and routine of reading with her, co-reading, co-learning, introducing a lot of joys and routines in a young children's life. You've done everything right. So, to me, this what you're describing is actually, the perfect page of parenting, dedicating time and fostering that love of reading. Now, this phase that your child might be in, it could be just a phase, by the way, but it could also be one where striving to look more for passions, interests of the child, and adapting maybe some of the readings and activities with the child, but continuing on exactly what you had been doing. The sharing of these precious moments is exactly what needs to happen. Of course, over time, the child will look for more independence. It's a totally developmentally appropriate behavior from a child. But actually, she might be even on the early side to do this, but it might be a really good thing. So also fostering that and celebrating those very natural, independent seeking behavior from children is good too.
Isabelle, I want to go back to your book. And again, we talk about the role of parents, especially in education and also in raising children. Now, this is something else that you wrote, and I quote: men who had warm childhood relationships with their mothers earn a lot more money on average than men whose mothers were uncaring. I mean, Isabelle, let's be honest. We know we're not living in this perfect world, and everyone grew up in different backgrounds. And there's no denying that we're seeing more and more single parents are struggling, especially when we talk about the relationship with the children, as they continue to grow and to different phases. From your perspective, how should we understand a statement like that? Because I know that when I share portion of your book with my friends, I would say 3 to 4 single parents, mom and dad, they really resonated with the sentence. Especially it says that men who had warm childhood relationships with their mothers earn a lot more money on average than men whose mothers were uncaring. How do we understand that? Go ahead.
Yeah. So there are two sides actually to this. There is one very important aspect, which is to say the science is so clear. This data that this quote is in particular, but also many other data points from research suggest that a child who has had lesser love and lesser nurturing relationships, especially in the very early years, is worse off in terms of brain development, in terms of brain activity, in terms of lifelong success. Okay, so the early years seem to matter extraordinarily in a child and human development. At the same time, the other thing that is very important for all your listeners and everyone here who is listening to this podcast is that a lot of these early years can also be love can happen at any moment of life. Learning is a lifelong journey. Love is too. And as a matter of fact, there are many research that suggest that protective, what is referred to by researchers as protective factors, can have a huge positive impact. Protective factors, one of the big one being relationships, can have a major positive impact in later life, including in older generations. Older adults that have more friends, live longer, and all these very interesting facts that are coming out of research. So The early years matter a lot, yes, but if someone hasn't had a great early childhood for whatever reason, um, there is hope as well. My key
Well,
message. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, Isabel, I have two more questions before letting you go. Now, again, going back to your book, especially a part of the title of the book is transformative. I mean, I think today we are, as humans, we desire for relationships and we desire better, stronger relationships. But one thing that you borrow a quote from, again, I don't want to butcher the name, it's called George Vaillant. I mean, again, the quote is called, happiness is love, full stop. We're living in the age where, which is AI is everywhere. Social media, it's growing. Human relationships are becoming more and more sophisticated. I mean, it's not easy to balance and also to manage any relationships today. So, from your perspective, very simple. I think this is something everyone across the spectrum is chasing after happiness. For children, for parents, especially for children in education, how do we find or how do we help them to find happiness? Is it about social media? Is it about offering materialistic items? Is it about fulfill this Christmas wish list or birthday presents or anything else? So, Isabel, give us the magic answer. What is happiness for children today? Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, our happiness today is very simple, is human relationships. And in what you said, there is something really paradoxical that's happening at the moment, which is yes, people know intuitively and they want more of those strong relationships in their lives, whether it's at home, in education settings. We know that. This is very well known. There is nothing that I'm adding to something that's very intuitive to all of us. However, here is where I find it very troubling, and the paradox that we have in our societies is that we do not measure relationships. There are very few data on, for example, how many strong relationships a child has, or trainings for teachers on how to be relational. None of this exists really today. We don't pay attention. It's almost like as if it were the most important thing and we take it for granted because it's so intuitive and human that we take it for granted and we don't really pay attention to it. So what I would love to see and for us to have more happiness for children around us and for all of them to thrive is a system, whether it's on education or at home, where we really prioritize those human connections a lot more than we are today.
Isabel, I want to end our conversation by asking you the last question. Again, the book is called Love to Learn: The Transformative Power of Care and Connections in Early Education. What would you expect the readers to understand when we finish reading the last chapter of this book? Because again, being parents, it's not easy. And raising kids, oh Lord, if someone can write a book, it could be 13,000 pages long. But you're the expert. Help us with better understanding for anyone who's very much interested in reading your book, or for all of us as parents. Why should we read your book, and what can we expect from reading this amazing book? Final thoughts.
Greatest predictor of academic and overall life outcomes is relationships. Is having friends in the early years, is being pro-social in the early years. All these elements are huge predictors of life success, much more than GPA or IQ.
Mm,
What really matters is what I call in the book relational intelligence, this
mm.
capacity to relate with others. So my one final word would be let's pay more attention to relationships and human connections, especially as artificial intelligence and other technologies are rising around us.
Well, again, you really hit the nail on the head. Even though relationships are difficult, but as we mentioned before, we desire stronger relationships. And regarding friendships or marriage or relationships with family members and whatsoever, but isolation or loneliness are going to be there forever. But one thing that we can overcome those struggles and overcome those difficulties is to build positive, healthful, and also meaningful relationships with one another. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's such an honor to speak to Isabelle Hau. I mean, again, Isabelle is the executive director of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, a Stanford-wide initiative to connect researchers across discipline and bridge research, practice, and policy to bring quality, scalable, and equitable learning experiences for all learners. And I strongly encourage everyone go online to check out her new book, Love to Learn: The Transformative Power of Care and Connection in Early Education. Well, Isabelle, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and we love to have you back on the show as we continue to explore and discover human relationships, and especially for young kids, and also offering tips and advice for parents. Again, thank you so much for your time, and love to have you for our future episodes. Really appreciate it.